Welcome to the Social Work Rants podcast, providing a platform for social workers to share their stories. The podcast covers a wide range of topics, including mental health, social justice, policy, and the day-to-day realities of the profession. This season, season 9, we'll be focusing on the mental and emotional aspects of money for people of color. Hope you enjoy. Hello, social workers, mental health professionals, and change agents. Welcome to another episode of the Social Work Rants podcast. I'm your host, Machsimo. Saludos a todos. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, tapping in wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast. I appreciate all the love and support. Gracias a todos por su apoyo. Continue watching the podcast or listen to the podcast however you listen. Podcast is on all audio platforms and, of course, the YouTube. So if you're a visual learner or watcher, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, subscribe, download episodes wherever you listen to podcasts or however you listen to podcasts. Follow the podcast on social media platforms on Instagram at the Social Work Rants Podcast. That is all one word. On Twitter, X at Social Work Rants, and Facebook, aka Meta. Type in the Social Work Rants Podcast, hit that like button. We're going to do something a little different, but relates to social work and business, as we've been talking about business and finances a lot in season 9. Before I get started, disclaimer, this podcast is not to be used as a substitute for individual therapy. If you need assistance, call 988, call 911. If you have a therapist, call your therapist. If you have a psychiatrist, call your psychiatrist. It's okay not to be okay, but get the help that you need. For all my viewers or listeners outside of the good old US of A, whatever your emergency line is, use that and get the help that you need. And this podcast is brought to you by Bass Moreno Consulting, providing financial education and counseling for people of color in the sandwich generation. If you have children and caring for an older adult or older adult parents or family members simultaneously, you are a member of the sandwich generation. For more information, go to bassmorenoconsulting.com. I am offering a free 25-minute consultation on how mental and emotional wellness are affecting your money. So definitely tap in on that. My guest at this time is a sexologist therapist out in Texas.
Dallas. Yep.
Oh, as a district court, and they're getting their bus whipped right now.
Yeah,
That's a
I
whole other story.
know. Listen, I don't even say that I'm a fan. I just let them do their thing and disappoint me every year. No.
Dr. Jessica Sanchez, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm so happy to be here and share energy and space with you because just like you said, we're going to be doing things a little bit different on this episode. And so I just always appreciate, especially when other Latinos are open to talking about human sexuality. So thank you so much for the invite.
No, I'm glad we were able to make this happen. And, it's an important conversation because it's natural to have sex. Procreation is in the Bible, so
Right.
it's like whether you're religious or not, I mean, it's in there. So it's like
Yep.
we hear it in our music, in our culture. I mean, I'm still stuck on the '90s in terms of music for the most part.
Of
So
course.
talking about "Color Me Bad" and Jodeci and like Boyz II Men and
Yeah.
so like definitely all the bumping and grinding, all that
Right.
stuff. So it's like, why not have these conversations, especially in the Latino community? There's a lot of Machsimo and history domination and it's domestic violence awareness month. So it's like all that wrapped into one, and I'm sure finances plays a lot into that. So especially yes, financial DV that doesn't get talked about enough. You could be experiencing that and not even knowing that you're experiencing that. So all that to say, Dr. Sanchez, for those who don't know who you are, let people know who you are and what you do in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm located in Dallas, Texas. I'm originally from the Midwest, Nebraska. And I say that just because a lot of people, they hear Nebraska and usually they're just like completely like, what? People of color live there, Latinos live there, Black people live there. And I'm like, yes, there's a thriving population of brown and Black folks in Nebraska. And especially when I'm talking to someone who's Latino and I talk about the migration for the farming land, it's
Mm,
all brown folks dominating out there. So born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska. Went out to Philly for a couple years for grad school. I missed the East Coast so much, the hustle and grind. I wanted to get back closer to home, but also wanted to be in a city where sex therapists did not exist, especially sex therapists of color, knowing that there's a niche. When people realize that I do exist, they're like, wait, how do I book you? Because just like you were saying, regardless of the color of your skin, human sexuality is a part of the lived experience. And I feel like every single culture, religion, it's so taboo to
mhm,
talk about our bodies. But yet, and especially women, and especially when I think of being Mexicana, I'm asked, when am I going to have a baby? But I was like, can someone like actually tell me how my body works first
mhm,
before we're asking about all these other adult conversations, right? And here I am, a
mhm,
young adolescent. And so that was definitely like my inspiration, right? Like I feel like I've always been an educator, so makes sense that I'm a full-time professor as well at the University of Texas at Arlington in the School of Social Work. Love that I'm a licensed social worker. I'm a community connector, natural advocate, especially for historically oppressed communities. But then when I was really thinking about that micro level work that I wanted to do, and at the macro too, because they intersect, we know this. Um, I was like human sexuality. Like I was always kind of like the leader. I'm firstborn, so I'm used to taking up space. And I remember like all my homegirls in high school, my father had ingrained in me and my sisters, there's two rules to follow in this household. Everyone becomes a doctor and no one gets pregnant out of wedlock. And so I
mm,
tell people like that was my sex education in the home and that was it. There was no other talks about the body, anything like that, relationships, nothing. And so I remember like when all my homegirls, right, like we all started dating, I was like, we all need to get on birth control because I don't want any of us getting pregnant. And I should have known then that I was going to be, a sex therapist, a sex educator, because it was just natural. And then, making sure my sisters followed route with me and we all became doctors. We all got our doctorate. They're on the medical side of
mhm,
things. I'm on the research side of things. But being a sex therapist has, again, instigated so many beautiful conversations with humans on planes, on at restaurants, sitting at the bar, at talking to other practitioners in the field, and even social workers being like, we don't talk about this enough. And I'm like, right. There's a huge abundance of research coming out right now. And I just got done writing a chapter on how professors in the School of Social Work and anywhere we need to start being way more sex positive and talking to future clinicians, these students, whether they're going to be micro, macro, meso, you have to be able to talk about human sexuality. Otherwise, we're not treating the entire body. We're not treating
mhm.
the client, in their entire body. So, a little bit about me and my professor role. And then I have my own sexual wellness essentials business where I'm a therapist, keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, all those fun things.
Wow, awesome. What what is the like right off the bat when you say someone's you say your what you do, what's like the biggest misconception of
Yeah.
what people have of what you do?
Yeah, they think that like I'm in people's bedrooms, and that's against our code of ethics, folks. I say social workers, we have some of the strictest, I feel like, codes of ethics that we go by with our license. I've never met a licensed practitioner that is in anyone's bedroom, helping them, right? Because again, we all live by our code of ethics, but a lot of people kind of misconstrue, and it really comes down to being objectified when you think about it, right? And
Mm,
I will say, heavily way more when I do say, and I'm very selective of when I say what identity I'm in, but men will tend to kind of like their brains will go very quickly to the bedroom. And I quickly bring them back, right, on again the code of ethics piece and say, no, this is therapy, this is talk therapy, this is decolonizing therapy, this is holistic forms of care, and really helping folks and kind of breaking down my areas of specialty. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about it like that. And you're right, like therapy is so much more than what kind of is painted
Mhm.
in, movies, podcasts, whichever we're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny because I was just on a podcast and I was it's saying kind of the same thing. Like we're more than just like laying on the couch and just talking about whatever we decide to talk about. Like there's so
Right.
many different things, different modalities. There's even like ketamine stuff.
Yeah.
There's so many different things. Hip hop therapy. I've done episodes regarding that. There's just so many things that are in the space, and there's so many incredible, therapists of
Mhm.
color like yourself who are doing amazing work, in the space. And I know Dallas, or so many incredible social workers, therapists, made from Dr. Letty, who I've had on the podcast, and
Yeah.
the authors of the
Yeah.
um, Chingona's book that came out
Yeah.
earlier, and I had the pleasure of having some of them on the podcast, uh, and I was in Dallas, no, last year, hating on them in person on top of doing a presentation and talk. So, yeah, so just the amazing work that's happening down there in Texas, and so many just all over the community doing amazing work.
Yeah, we DFW, I mean, depending on which article you're looking at, we're either the number 1 largest metroplex in the country or we're the number 2. And I will tell you, I think we're seeing it more across the nation where, representation matters and you're seeing brown folks going into the field of mental health, and reflecting in social workers, but we have still so much work to do here
Mm,
because I still hear people say, "Well, I'm ready to," and they're Latino, right? Latina, and they're ready to get a therapist, but they're having to click multiple clicks to find someone that has a similar last name or maybe, similar characteristics like the physical traits of
mm,
someone that makes someone feel connected. And Dr. Letty's doing amazing work. And so the moment we had met, right, our circle's small here. Like that's what I'm saying. The DFW seems so big, but then once you get to social workers, mental health,
mm,
ooh, the world goes so small.
mm.
So we got to get you back out for the Hispanic Mental Health Conference next year because I help with the planning committee. So we will be in
Okay.
touch.
And I told her the last time that the lady came on the podcast, I did my spiel already. I'll be a good sport and not say a word about the Cowboys.
That's fair.
uh, yes, so I brought up misconception. So
Yeah.
I actually met a an adult entertainer
Okay.
for a proper or a porn star, for lack of a better word. And
Yeah.
I asked that question, and I asked the question like what's the biggest misconception in related to
Mm-hmm.
porn? And it's like, no, they're very strict in terms of HIV and
Mm-hmm.
AIDS testing. Like she gets tested. She told me how often she got tested and like ready to do like the scenes, like pretty much come like the tests come back very quickly. So it's
Yeah.
just like this is interesting to get the kind of like behind the scenes of that. And that being said, how as like in your work do you see like porn playing a factor in terms of like your work that you're seeing? And there's this myth, or maybe it's not a myth, about sex addiction. Do you even like see that like tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Evidence-based research is telling us that young boys in particular are being exposed to porn at ages 7, 8, and 9. That's like
Wow.
the largest like age group. And so when I'm talking to parents, right, I was like, do you want them to learn from the screen or do you want them to hear it from you on, sex and their bodies and how, to take necessary precautions and safety and consent? And when I educate them about that, they have that look of like, oh my gosh, right? And especially if there's students at school however many hours a week, and they have the cell phones, they have the iPads. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
accessibility to technology. And so that's a reality of our youth here in the United States. And so really empowering parents to feel more comfortable with engaging in those conversations. And I love saying to parents too, I will ask them, who did you need when you were younger? Sometimes, depending on where they're at in their parenthood journey, I'll get immediate tears, or I'll
Mm-hmm.
get some very, even, regardless if there's tears or not, there are always deep discussions around, yeah, I needed someone to answer the hard questions and I didn't have that person. So become that person for your child. Let's rewrite that script, not only for yourself, but for our culture, for our community, because that's how we start to change those narratives, right? Around sex and whatnot. And so leading with that, but I feel like because sex education in America, I'm in Tejas, right? So we are abstinence only. We don't talk about pleasure, we don't talk about consent. If we are talking about our youth, and sex, it's high STI rates, high teen pregnancy. A lot of Latinas, like, the community gets put on blast because usually we're always number one with high teen pregnancy rates.
Mm-hmm.
But our sex education isn't informing our students of what they really want to know. When they are being given consent driven education that prioritizes healthy relationships, safety, and pleasure, we see our teen pregnancy rates actually drop because they know, I'm actually going to prolong or wait on that because I actually have my questions answered. Or if I do decide to engage in sex, now I have the actual knowledge on how to protect myself. And so we see
Mm-hmm.
this decrease. And so Texas is one of those states, right, where we're constantly going up and down in regards to our rates. But I think of our youth and the exposure to social media and how porn, if you're not getting your questions answered in the classroom, or your parents or your caregivers aren't opening up those discussions for you, porn is the next best thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I love that your experience with someone who is in the adult film industry was a positive one. And it sounds like, right, that they're being proactive with their testing. I would assume that they're talking about the scenes before. So everyone knows what to expect. And therefore, consent has been, at the forefront. Um, but some our youth or the men that are watching porn, even women, anyone, they may not see all of that. They don't see what happens behind the scenes, right? They see
Mm-hmm.
the scene itself.
Mm-hmm.
And you continuously watch maybe something over and over that gives your body the stimulation. Well, you may start to believe that that's exactly what the sex script is. And then you attempt to go date, and let's say you move forward with that person and sharing sexual energy, and all of a sudden it's an instant replay of what you watched over and over again. And now, more than likely, safety's not at the forefront, consent has not been any type of conversation at hand. And now we could say, like, sexual assault has possibly happened, right? Or some type of
Mm-hmm.
physical violence, or whatnot, manipulation, coercion. We could name them all. And so I would say, it's a driving factor when I'm working, especially because I'm a university professor. And because of my background, I talk about human sexuality in the classroom for my students. And we talk about porn and, the benefits and also the negatives to porn. But just reinforcing, right? Like that consent piece, the safety piece. I wouldn't say I necessarily say it, or I haven't seen it too much. I mean, this ebb and flow with your clients. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'll have an uptick, where couples are struggling and porn may be a factor. But there's usually more underlying things going on in a sense of, well, why have we resorted to porn and what happened to our sex life? How do we get back to that if both people are still invested in one another? But it's not like a constant variable all the time. I'll tell you that, between my couples, especially.
Gotcha. Which, well, let me go back because my like my mind is racing with multiple questions.
Yeah.
Wouldn't having a kid 7, 8, and 9 watching porn be considered like some sort of child abuse in a way, or like able to
I
get
mean, well, you have to
parents able to
remember,
get
like,
in trouble with
I don't know if that would necessarily be
like some
a
sort of
label
neglect?
of like child abuse or neglect. I mean, I think there could be circumstances, right? And I'm sure it's
Mm,
happened, but I think it's that 9 times out of 10, it's the parents are like the shock factor. I
Mm,
can't believe because I wasn't monitoring what they were searching on their phone or the iPad. And now there's a bigger discussion at had, right? With getting the parent caught up to feeling comfortable. But also, we can't implement now shame and guilt because now we're writing a whole nother script that's not going to make
mm,
that child feel good. And so, having those honest and courageous conversations, but we have to be that's what I'm telling parents, right? Like we have to be realistic. If they're going to be at school, even if they don't have a phone, but their peers have phones and the hormones are
mm.
everywhere, but they're
Right.
not getting the, a sound sex education, they're going to find it somewhere.
Abs- Absolutely. I know. Like started off like in the '90s. Like there was actual magazines and
Right.
not necessarily Playboy, but it was even more graphic magazines. And remember, classmates would bring the magazines to school, and like that was like my initial like
Yeah.
education.
And also like we talk about it all the time, like Sex with Sue Johansson. We talk BET Uncut Late Night. Like I
Mhm,
used to stay up to watch all of that because that was my only like way to be exposed, but also get questions. I used to love like Sex with Sue Johnson because she would answer all my questions. And so yeah, you start asking parents, I'm like, tell me when the first time you saw porn. And they always say like Playboy or some type of magazine or depending on which community I'm talking to, right? But yeah, like those were some of our first messages. And we
mhm.
didn't go tell our parents that we had saw it.
Right.
So yeah.
No, yes, I remember like I used to go went to like a high school fair and stuff, and then they'll have a table and like giving out free condoms, and like I came home with a bag. I knew I wasn't gonna use it. I came home like show my dad, and it's like bota eso. I'm like, and I looked at him like, what the hell do you mean? Like it's just like you're not gonna like educate me or show how to use
Right,
it, or I got the myth from my mom is like you got to use two. I was like, it's
right.
like that that's always been like a myth, like growing up, and even heard it like in R&B music. Like it's like
Uh-huh.
what are you talking about?
And I don't know about yours, but like when I do my presentation, I do a staple one around, redefining trauma or victim-centered and trauma-informed care to include sex, bodies, and pleasure. And when I talk about the sex education piece in my experience, I'll say like show of hands, from folks in this room who saw like the very traumatizing vaginal birth of a child and just this
Hmm.
woman screaming. And there's always
Hmm.
half of the room raises their hand and is like, oh my gosh, yes. And then I go, and then right after that video, my PE teacher flipped over to like the old school power, projector things, whatever they were, and did a bunch of images of genitalia with STIs on
Hmm.
them. So my two scripts for my K through 12 education was if you have sex, you're either going to be that woman having this horrendous birth or this is what your genitalia is going to look like. Right? So then
Yep. Those images traumatized me for a long time to the point that then I was no way like I'm not having sex for a long time.
right. So like, I mean, you could say then, like based on even our experiences, like fear, abstinence only, it works a little bit,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, the exposure, this is the influence of social media, it's still there, right? And so yeah, yeah, we could go on all that's a whole podcast in itself.
No, definitely. I was like, these images are like, I do not need my genitalia look like a Lakers road jersey, looking
Right.
pur- bright ass purple. Like, no, no, thank you. Looking like grimace. Like,
For real. And you know what? You know what frustrated me the most is it wasn't until high school because that was specifically in middle school, but it wasn't until like my senior year that I remember our health teacher there was like, "Yo, there's two different types of penises." And we were like, "What?" Because when you're showing all the STIs on the different genitalia, right? All of us completely missed in 8th grade that there was a difference between being circumcised and not circumcised. But I
mm,
was just like, because again, the fear tactic and the way that there was that information was presented to us, I didn't know until 18 years old that there was literally uncircumcised penises and, not. And so I was just like mind blown that that should have been, because if I missed that, think about the boys in the room
Mm-hmm.
with penises, right? And not knowing any type of difference, or if they're not being told even at home. And so, yeah, it was wild when I sit and I still think about it.
A wild time in the 80s and 90s for
Right.
sure.
Gosh.
which, which leads to as a parent myself,
Yeah.
what tidbits for parents do you have to have the talk, especially for someone who never had the proper talk to kind of like give the proper talk.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
not and not relying on school, because obviously depending what state you're in, there won't
right.
be no sex education, so now it's up to the parents to step up to the plate to give that proper education.
Well, you know what? And I think that's a good place to start, because if you are in like a state like Texas, if they want even level two, and I'm making things up here, but like, to talk about healthy relationships and like good touch, bad touch, there has to be a parent permission slip signed, right? So essentially the parent
Mm,
consenting that their child can sit in that session. And so it's like, parents, if y'all aren't comfortable having that conversation, then sign the form. So then they can still understand about their bodies, right? And allow an educator to provide at least that little bit so they get something. Because I think what's detrimental is the parents that don't have, or just they don't feel comfortable to have the conversation, but then they don't sign the slip. So
mm,
the student is the one that pays for that, right? In the end. So if you do live in a state where the schools are bringing you in as parents and saying, "Hey, do we have your consent? Sign the form, please." Because it's probably going to give your child a lot more information than what you're willing to provide. I would also say too, in the world of technology, and being that we have podcast, we have YouTube, we have amazing Instagram accounts of educators, sex educators alike, even therapists that are just more on a sex positive realm. You have content at your fingertip that can make you feel a lot more equipped to have these conversations, and or even just starting in the world of like consent. I think it's so important that we're talking to our children about understanding what consent means. Because the moment that they can pick up that they need to consent in order for someone to touch their body or even be in their energy, right? Like their circle or close to them, that is a ripple effect. And there's so many beautiful videos, especially on YouTube, around healthy relationships, consent for teens and younger folks alike. Watch that video together first, and then have a simple conversation after of, well, what did you learn in that video? As a parent, I would watch it first. That way you already see it for yourself. And then
mm.
you already have your talking points ready to go. Bring your child in, watch again with them, and just start that dialogue. And it really goes back to even what I was saying first, Boz, about like who did you need when you were younger?
Mm.
Become that person for your child. You don't have to continue kind of that harmful intergenerational script that didn't serve you. But you can rewrite that so you're more serving of your child or children. And then I think those are kind of like my main ones, right? It's just like maximizing on social media. If you have the funds, because sometimes therapists don't take insurance, or if they are, cash pay, it can be very expensive. But getting a therapist on your team who specializes just in human sexuality or sex therapy, you could do a couple sessions and get some really solid talking points down for yourself. And then be like, okay, cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate your help. And then you go and have those conversations with your children. So that could definitely be another way as well.
I like that those suggestions. So what what do you see seeing you touched on how Texas is and like the pendejo Governor Abbott and otro pendejo Mr. Cruz running amok, and hopefully in November Cruz will be out, but who knows. But like how are they if any way, like affecting what can you do in your work, like or what are you seeing that's affecting like the communities that you're currently serving?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be completely honest with you. It As social workers, I think you feel it too when I get ready to say this, like election years are rough. It's rough just as existing as a person of color in this country, knowing where politics goes so quickly and how the rhetoric can be used to spew so much hate towards brown folks, especially in Texas. We're literally at the border, right? And
Mm,
so I just think those harmful spews just they come so quickly, and then all of a sudden it's, oh, all Mexicans are rapists or serial
mm,
killers, and it's not good on anyone. Whether you're providing the care or, attempting to take care of yourself so you can still continue to provide the care. But I mean, when I think of, in regards to even sex education, DEI stuff, it's a very conservative agenda down here. And I think they look at research in one way, and they believe in that research. And so that is a direct reflection of the policies that get put in place, right? And that can feel very censoring, I think, at times, especially for Gen Z. Like, let's be real, Gen Z is out here ready to put on the boxing gloves,
mm,
regardless of kind of where they shift on the political arena. Um, but they're ready to use their voices and exercise their rights. And so I think they're just in the movement as well, especially here in Texas, of being like, we want better, we deserve better, we're demanding better. So it'll be interesting, like you said, to see kind of if there's any political shifts happening down here and in any other states, right, that are predominantly
mm,
usually conservative and red leaning.
mm. So I want to touch on a little bit regarding immigration and was relates to sex and sex
Yeah.
education. I know for myself, earlier this year, working at an outpatient HIV clinic and having, um, especially the area where I worked, there was a lot of Latinos moved into the community, and they come in getting sick, and then come to find out that they're HIV positive, and they're even like the basics of their first question, how did I get it? I'm like, to the point where we really have to explain it to them. These are like only like the few ways you could contact HIV and contract it, and it's like they don't even didn't even know that. So, and of course,
Yeah.
it coming from poor, underserved countries and coming into the country. So, on top of you immigrating to a brand new country, now you seeing a doctor, and then all of a sudden you got HIV. So now you navigating that, and like the stigma that's in our Latino community on the stigma of just HIV that continues, even though like
Right.
we're going on almost 40 years, and now all these medications that have been game changers, that just once once a pill one pill once a day, to even now having injections like every three
Yeah.
months now. To so much has changed, but yet the stigma is so real in our community. Like what are you seeing in terms of that?
Yeah, I mean, like we said, right? Like the huge immigration flows that are constant. And I think there's a disproportionate of HIV and STI. I would also say, not planned pregnancies as well. I think my first thing that comes to mind as a practitioner who serves a lot of victims and or survivors of sexual and relationship violence is, when I think of that immigration, the migration journey is constantly having to live in a state of contracting for safety. And when you look at research, especially a lot of women, but also men, again, in that journey of experiencing sexual assault. And so when I hear someone say, well, how did I get to this point? Well, when your body and your nervous system is constantly dysregulated for however long that journey was, and that was your ability to remain alive, right? Contracting for safety was essentially giving your body to someone, that was the smuggler or the coyote, however they're identifying. it's not too far off almost. It doesn't feel unrealistic to hear that. And our research is also saying the same of the sexual violence that happens. So I think that's where my mind naturally goes to. But I also think of, when I think of our community, the influence of Catholicism and maybe just even religion as a whole. And again, that
Mm.
taboo-ness of what you said in the beginning, it's in the Bible, but why don't we talk about it? Like we don't,
Mm.
there's this so much stigma and shame and guilt. And so when they are, migrating here, it's almost like similar experiences of like the sex education or lack thereof within our family and cultural units. It's just almost maybe different languages depending on where your family was born and those generational ties, right? And I think of, again, living on the border where we have Chicanas, Mexicanas, different experiences. And so yeah, that it's a constant education, and then hopefully being able to again provide, like, normalizing that life continues to move forward. And look at all the progressive medicine that we have been able to implement, and that you can take the pill or the injection and also be undetectable. Like, if
Mm-hmm.
you stay on your, the medication journey and take care of your body. I think we're seeing this huge shift in the mental health world, the HIV prevention world, where the normalization, like, it's beautiful to see how many commercials now
Yeah,
are on
absolutely.
TV, and they're
Mm-hmm.
doing such a great job at representation
Mm-hmm.
of not just gay men. I've seen so many heterosexual couples be on these commercials as well.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, like, just like violence doesn't discriminate, it definitely disproportionately impacts, right, communities at higher rates, especially historically oppressed. The same thing with HIV. HIV is not going to discriminate, but it absolutely does impact historically oppressed and underserved communities at higher rates, right? So that constant education, and when they get here, as long, being connected to services, hopefully staying connected to support services to make sure their mental health stays, at a strong point of, you're going to get through this. You have still so much life to live. Stay connected to your support systems and on your medication, and rewriting that script for themselves.
No, yeah, absolutely. I love the that's how like I even landed the part of the reason why I landed the job is because of these commercials. So I seen all these commercials for all these different medications and also
Yeah.
the spectrum of people that they use from heterosexual, LGBTQ plus
Yeah.
members to it doesn't matter, black, brown, Hispanic, like it was just a variety, and then all the different medications that are out now, and it's been a total game changer. Obviously, there's more work that needs to be done,
Right.
obviously, to continue to end the stigma of HIV
Yep.
and just mental health in general. Like this no es una locura
Yeah.
as we say in our community. Like this is okay, not to be okay. Like this
Yep.
is uh not normalizing like depressed and not doing something about it. Like like
Mhm.
actually go see somebody and kind of like just get the help that you need.
Right. And I think with that, it's when I'm in the classrooms with youth, right? Like I lead Gen Z essentially right now, and knowing that, especially that since I'm more than likely teaching an undergrad class, when you think of undergrad, that's 18 to 24 years old, 24-year-olds. And this is the first time in their life where they're getting autonomy and agency over their own bodies. I already know that if 90% of my class was born and raised in Texas, their sex education didn't exist. SI institution, so more than likely brown students all in front of me. And then I'm telling them, right, like, y'all, this is the first time where you're deciding whether you go to class. This is the first time you're deciding what you're eating today. Like, from the moment you came out the womb until you step foot on this college campus, your house has been determined for you, the food has been determined for you, your clothing has been determined for you, because more than likely it was from parents and or caretakers, guardians that were responsible. But now all of a sudden, they get to make all these decisions, and it's a very overwhelming experience because they weren't equipped when they were
Mm,
children and adolescents. And so, with that, as they are coming into usually their bodies for the first time, and they're learning how to be, even what, again, consent is, what a healthy relationship is. Um, I tell them all the time, y'all, first date should be going and getting tested together.
mm,
And then if you're out here living your best life and having, you're really feeling comfortable and sharing your sexual energy, I want you to make sure you're being safe. But then I want you getting tested once every 6 months. And even when you get booed up, I still need you to get tested
mm,
because, I always give the example of my parents. My parents have been married for 38 years. I tell my mom, you better stay getting tested every single year. I love my father so much. And of course, I believe he would never do anything, right? But still, it's you do it for you. You do it for your
mm.
body so you know your status and you're keeping yourself safe. And my students, they have those light bulb moments. And I'm like, on campus, it's free here. You can go right up to HELP, which is LGBTQ plus outreach, right up the street from campus. We got Planned Parenthood straight up the street. I said, you got all these free resources, protect your body. So even like normalizing the testing, of like,
But of course, that was actually one of my questions. Like, why can't there's such a stigma even just to get tested, even if you're in a committed relationship,
yeah,
you still have to just get tested, like just to be like, all right, it's part of your health, like just like you get a physical, they just, or even like doctors, that should just be part of like the physical, like just get get the tested, get tested
yep,
along with your blood work done, and
exactly.
kind of find find out like if there's no issue, you're not doing anything
Right.
risky, then like there shouldn't be any issue not to get tested.
One time my father, he heard me, like, me and my mom, he heard us over talking, and I was like, "You better still, I don't care that you've been married to dad for," I think this is like a 33 mark or something like that, right? And he's like, "Why would you say that?" And I was like, "You're getting defensive. I'm not out here saying that you're doing anything." And I said, "But you should be getting tested too." And he kind of looked at me because, in his mind, my mom is his world. That is his queen. And again, he would never go behind her back. My whole thing is y'all should be doing this for yourself. And he was kind of like, okay, I got you, like once I settled him down a little bit, but he took it as like, why would you tell your mom that, and things like that. I would never do anything. But it's just the part of you knowing your status and that you're healthy and you're good. So I love what you said about that.
Yeah, because even like you mentioned, like growing up, like even for years I didn't even like know like there were like female condoms. Like, why is this not even like talked about that? You know, girls or you're identified as female, like
Right,
just being able to, there's a condom for you that you can use and not rely on a male partner or someone with a penis to be
right,
responsible for having the condom. Like just don't use both condoms at the same time. Decide
right.
together who's gonna use the condom and just use it.
Yeah, and like we were talking about like dental dams one time, and like one of my students asked her, like, oh, so can we use like saran wrap? No, like, but this is the importance. And I was so,
Mm,
it made the class laugh. And that's when you're doing it right. When those type of
mm,
just comments or questions are coming forward because it's in their mind and they truly want to know. And so of course I didn't respond like how I just did. I was like, thank you so much for that question. That's a great question. But no, like I want you to make sure you're using medically designed, to ensure your safety. But I was like, yeah, and I'm pretty sure there's even like a rap song that talks about like saran wrap or something. And so I was like, they probably heard it
right.
there, right? But just like we said, the influence of social media, rap music, any type of music that you're listening to.
Mm,
And so they asked the question, right? And I'm like, it's a legit question because you're hearing it out in the, real world. And so that makes
yeah.
sense. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're better than me. I might have chuckle first and then like quickly be said what you said, but like
Right.
oh, or it might have been like, what rap, what damn rapper said that?
Right. Yeah. Let's cancel them. No.
No, but like I mean, it's like I say, it's all genres of music. Cause I'm like I'm a big bachata too, and it's always like
Yes.
sexualized and stuff. It's a lot.
Well, and I think that when you were talking earlier, like going back to the machismo, just like trait that is very tied into our culture, but like when men are hearing that song or even women hearing and being like, oh, like that's how I'm supposed to act, or like that's now what I expect of a man because that's what I'm constantly hearing from the music. So we can see like how quickly it can get very like that gray area, right? And the
Mm,
influence of people and their gender scripts and roles, but you're hearing that constantly and then you're thinking that's the norm, or all of a sudden you hear this, script within music, and if it's sexually driven and then all of a sudden you're doing it to your partner, but there's been no discussion about, hey, I would like to explore this with you. It can get just bad quickly, right? And I think that
mm,
machismo, like the dominance piece, can be very problematic depending on how that man is exerting that dominance
mm.
over their partner or even family members, friends, right? Because it can go beyond romantic partners as well.
No, I I totally understand that. So since it's National DV month, like like what are you seeing in terms of your relationships? I know you just touched on that, but like what other than the machismo, like what else like or like you seeing like in terms of couples and just in your research?
Yeah, so I feel like in regards to Domestic Violence Awareness Month, it's a busy month for me because I do one of my specialties is, helping survivors reclaim their body, pleasure, sexuality, especially after trauma. But I would say a big one is folks and their inability to communicate, especially when I think of partners and how many arguments or the control pieces that come out of that because of folks' inability to communicate. I think of too, if you were raised in a household where you saw your two parents and you saw a very dominant father and a very possibly submissive mother, um, and who kind of just went with whatever, your father said, or you did see forms of violence happening, and that was your normalized script for so many years. And then you go out and you start dating and you treat that woman just like you saw how your father treated your mom, you're just repeating that cycle, right? And until someone tells you, and usually it's by that point ends up being the law, right?
Mm-hmm.
That this is a physical charge, this is stalking, this is sexual assault, this is sexual harassment, right? This is intimate partner violence. And then at that point, it's like it's not a too late, but you're gonna go and you're gonna now, have a record and you're gonna serve your time. And um that woman or that victim is gonna have to go through their own healing process. And it just gets very I feel like that's another, like, you want to talk about taboo, like our culture is not ready to talk about, because we're so like, what happens in these four walls in this home,
Mm-hmm.
it stays in this home. Like you don't embarrass the my last name, Sanchez last name, right? You don't embarrass our name. Like that familismo is like so strong, and just the cohesion that exists within the family unit. And that's where you see like those cycles of violence
Mm-hmm.
continuing to get repeated over and over again. And until you have someone that comes along in that family and is like, that's stopping now, that ends with me, or, we're writing a new script here, that violence continues continues to get perpetrated.
No, yeah, I love that brought that up. There's definitely like whatever happens in the house stays in the house, and it's bring no shame into the name and into the house. And not gonna be like in the community. He's not gonna know about us. Like
Oh,
just just stays
yeah,
in here, and
yeah.
that leads to messes you up. The anxiety brings up, the depression builds up, and it's just like you said, the whole cycle continues. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
what
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like I grew up witnessing so much violent behavior from my grandfather, towards my grandmother, and just seeing the cultural dynamics of gender at play. And my father's a DV survivor as well as my abuelita, and I was just like, always astonished how like we would show up to family functions and act like everything's fine. And then, more harm would be done because alcohol would be involved, heavy, super heavy drinkers on the Sanchez side. And I think again, that's a part of our culture, especially or any, substances, I guess. And so yeah, it's just we have to also normalize at the same rate that we're having really hard conversations around, if it is sexuality or whatever, we got to be talking about that as well, and how a lot of things stop, with our generation because it's not moving forward. Otherwise, we're not doing any better than the ones, before us. And so that's just what I wanted to say.
Yeah, yeah. So, so want to talk about how COVID and
Mhm.
life before COVID and post COVID relates to like dating and relationships. And I know like we brought up porn before. I know like Pornhub made their service free for a while, and people were celebrating that for a bit, and kind of like people like you know living in the house or people like
Yep.
just because of like safety and not trying to catch COVID, were like just living together and kind of not able to go out. And there was like I saw some stats that like DV like kind of like went up
Yep.
initially, that kind of went under the rug, but like unfortunately, but like what did you see like how like COVID kind of played and post COVID played a part in our relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you speaking to the DB, right? Because I think the one thing like that's so important to talk about with domestic violence, because you have so many victims that suffer in silence. And so the one thing I just want to remind folks is like people who are perpetrators of domestic violence, especially like that physical piece, even the emotional manipulation, financial abuse, all of it, spiritual abuse, they don't do that to their colleagues at work. I think that's one thing, like a myth, like people think like the, perpetrators of DV are out doing it to everyone. And that's, when I'm working with someone who is a survivor, we process the heck out of that, of how this was a decision every single time they decided to perpetrate violence against that victim. It was, usually a very sound decision because they didn't do that while they were at work, right? Or they didn't do it when they're at the family gathering to everyone else. It was truly like towards that person when it was behind closed doors. So I think it's really important to lead with that. And that's what happened with COVID is all of a sudden victims were stuck at home with perpetrators right there. And then people are going through depression, anxiety because they can't go out. They're losing jobs left and right. Substance abuse is going through the roof because there's, coping mechanisms. What are those right now in the middle of a pandemic? So abuse was skyrocketing and victims had no way to escape. You talked a little bit, in regards to going back to that porn piece. And I think, during COVID, which side note, like Texas put in a law, so like people can't even get access to Pornhub here. Just to let you know, our like senators and something like that. I don't know, but you can't even get access to it. So, but they
Uh,
stay voting
another
on that side,
another reason not to go back to Texas.
right? But I think during that too, maybe I'm sure there's successes you could probably say. And I would be so curious to kind of figure out if this research even happened. But I think you saw it on both sides, people's relationships falling apart because work was your 40-hour escape for one another. And you came home, you only had to see each other for a couple hours, you would go to bed, you do it the same thing. And now all of a sudden, again, that person is right next to you. And you're like, I didn't even realize this person was like this.
Mm.
And then I think you saw the influx of online dating happening because people were like just wanting to have human connection after being forced to stay home. And then this porn piece coming in and probably like saving some relationships or helping relationships start on a really good foot. Because if you don't have a job or you're working from home or you're, whatever, you're trying to figure it out and you're trying to pass the time, and now all of a sudden porn is being used as almost an educational piece to expand the lens, that there is different kinds of sex, there's different topics to explore, etc. I'm sure there's research that said like COVID saved, some relationships or helped, and increase people's, sex lives, and their pleasure experience, right? Or ability to fantasize and whatnot. So I'm sure there's like a downfall and a,
Hmm.
a great, beautiful success story as well.
On that note, what are ways to spice up relationships, like, relationships, especially if you're with the same partner for a while, things can get mundane or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
what are things? What are tips to spice things up?
Well, I mean, I always say don't ever stop dating your person. I think that's really important, especially for my folks who have been in relationships for a really long time. I try to get them back onto the dating scene of what they were doing before to really win their person over. And so don't ever stop dating. If you remember the good memories of, oh my gosh, we love going here, bring that back in. Like tap into the inner child almost. We say that so much in social work on
Hmm.
tapping into the inner child. Tap back into, was it your younger adolescence, right? Or your 20s, your 30s, whenever you met that person and life was really fun, get back to that. Um, I think it really comes down to communication. So I talked to so many people, Boz, that were like, they'll tell me all these things that they want to happen in the bedroom, and then I'll look right at them after, of course, they've bought all my drinks, and I'm like, so have you told her or have you told him all of this? And they're just like, and I'm like, right, silence. And I only say that, right? Because of course they've opened up. I have great energy as a person, so I get it. There's a reason why I decided to go and be a sex therapist. But you got to communicate that to the person that you're with, And so really holding people
Right.
accountable, like if that's something, let's say you want to start exploring a little bit with some power play, let your person know. I always tell people, even when I'm working with an individual and we start to bring in their partner for a couple times, I have them do independent, like create your sex goals, like your ultimate sex goals list. And it's so fun when partners then come together. They've done it independently, and then they come together, not with me there. This is something they do like during date night, and they compare their goals. And then they're always come back to session. They're like, I found out so much about my partner. I had no clue that she wanted to do this. And it's almost like this, like, yeah, like because the communication piece is so crucial, right? So create your sex goals as separate and then come together and then like create your ultimate couples sex goals list, like your bucket list, right? Of things that you want to do together. Um, I think toys, right, are always fun to just like mix it up a little bit. Go to an actual, store together where you can shop and look at things and have fun conversations, hopefully, or just laugh like I can't believe that even existed, and just get those conversations going. Can also really help folks because you don't know what's out there until you see it type thing. And so just go and have fun with it. And then again, if you feel like your libido is down or you're not experiencing any type of like satisfaction, then please like consider having a sex therapist join your support team, right? So like you have your dentist, you have your doctors, you have, these other people. Consider bringing us onto your team. That way we can explore more of like what's really going on here. Because life is not easy. I
Hmm.
always say to people, and it's funny, boss, because you were talking about finances, and I was just talking to a relationships coach the other day, and she was saying like one of her male clients, was just like really stressed out. And I said, yeah, there's a direct correlation between finances and libido. If you're stressed out with money, the last thing you are probably thinking about is sex. Like there's a direct correlation to that. Because then you're trying to figure out how am I making my mortgage? How am I making my car note? How am I making insurance? How am I feeding my family? Like, you don't, sex is the last thing. And if your partner is over here not understanding you're so stressed out, right? And their libido is thriving, there's already a
Mm.
disconnect happening here. So hopefully those are some little tidbits that folks will have fun with.
Yeah, I could definitely understand like sex, especially time goes so fast that like you could easily go like 2 weeks and not in a relationship, not getting any action because you're busy working and come home, you're tired.
Right. And then if you have kids,
Because-
like if you're responsible for other
Exactly.
humans, like that's gonna be the last thing sometimes. So yeah, I always tell couples too, like take the time on Sunday nights, once the kids are in bed, take the time to sit down and just talk about the week and like get on the same page with your partner. Because a lot of times, too, that resentfulness that can happen when one partner feels like they're pulling more weight than the other, and the other person's over here, I'm so attracted to you, and da 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 da, and I'm ready to be intimate with you. And the other person's like, that's not me because I feel like I'm pulling all the weight. And so, have my couple sit down on Sunday nights and say, so and so it's got soccer practice at 5. You're picking them up. I'll have dinner ready. And then intentionally probably penciling in some intimacy. And that's okay. Like some people are like, oh, I could never schedule it. And I'm like, well, when life is lifing, sometimes we have to schedule everything, and that's okay too. So,
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that. I thought the same thing. But sometimes you have to put it in the schedule,
right. Nothing wrong with that.
whether it be in the morning or whatever wherever you get it in.
Exactly. Over lunch break, on work, like, you'll figure it out.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram as a Latina sexologist, on LinkedIn as Dr. Jessica Sanchez, and email latinasexologist@gmail.com. So please reach out if you're in Texas. I'm licensed in Texas, so I can serve, all my Texans here. Hopefully I'll start to get licensure in a couple other states. We'll see. Right now I'm booked and busy, so I'm in a really good spot, but please reach out if there's anything I can do to support.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, and this was a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. It was so great meeting you.